Just a reminder to our Speculating Wildly About Crime listeners, this is for entertainment purposes only and solely the thoughts and opinions of our team. We do invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Speculating Wildly About Crime. Today, we are going to be covering the very bizarre and puzzling disappearance of Brian Shaffer. Just to talk about a couple of my sources, I listened to the Dead or Alive podcast with Kelly Bruce. I listened to True Crime Garage. They did actually two-part episodes. So they covered it, I believe, in 2012, maybe. Don't quote me on that. And then they did a reprise in, I believe, 2019, where they brought on Lance and Timmy from Crawl Space and did a deeper dive into it, which was great. Also watched Dateline's episode, and then I watched and listened to countless news articles, Reddit dives, et cetera, et cetera. Brian grew up in Pickering, Ohio, which was just a little bit outside of Columbus, Ohio. Columbus is where Brian went to undergrad school and later was in med school. At the time of his disappearance, he was in his second year of med school. Brian's family consisted of a younger brother by the name of Derek, his father, Randall, and his mother, Renee. Unfortunately, just before Brian's disappearance in August of 2005, the Shaffer family was dealt a really rough hand, and Renee was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And Brian was already pretty close with his mother, but this cancer diagnosis definitely brought them a lot closer. So Brian was often going to appointments with Renee, and he would go to all of her chemo sessions and things like that. So they just created this really strong bond during the couple of months or weeks that she lived after her diagnosis. Unfortunately, Renee passed away on March 5th of 2006. I don't think any of us needs to say it out loud, but obviously this left the family devastated, and especially Brian. So he went into a little bit of a depression, but nothing severe enough to be like on Prozac or anything like that, but definitely was not quite himself after the death of his mother. When Brian went missing, he had been living alone on campus. He had a girlfriend by the name of Alexis. They had been dating for just under a year. Again, he was in his second year of med school at the Ohio State University. One thing to note before we talk about the date in question, he had a best friend named Clint, and Clint had a on-again, off-again girlfriend. Off the record, I think they were just like fuck buddies or something, low-key. So Brian, Meredith, and Clint went out for St. Patrick's Day. So this was just a couple weeks before his disappearance, a couple weeks after his mother passed away. They were drinking, as you do in your mid-20s. And later in the night, they were at a bar, and there was a verbal altercation that happened. Basically a fight, right? The cops give it this fancy term of a verbal altercation, but you could see Brian and Clint get in this huge fight. But it must not have been that awful, because later that same night, the three of them were hanging out at Brian's apartment. Additional weird information from that night, Brian also called Alexis that day and kind of tongue-in-cheek, but maybe not tongue-in-cheek, said, "Hey, would you run away with me? Let's just run away together today." And then a few days after that, Brian had another conversation with Alexis and said, "Hey, I think you should just move on. I think you'd be much better off without me. I'm not really dealing with my mother's death too well, and I think your life would be better without me," type of thing.
So you said verbal altercation. So that's leading us to believe it was like purely shouting at each other. There wasn't like some
Yeah.
shoving or anything physical.
Correct. Not at this point. And actually, I'm glad you brought this up. There was some weird thing that happened at an Ohio State football game, I think it was, where Brian went to the game with Clint, Meredith, and maybe Alexis was there too. And Brian ended up getting punched in the face. This was months before, it might even been before Brian's mother passed away. But some people thought that maybe Clint punched him in the face, or that Clint was the result of him getting punched in the face. But Clint did not punch him. It was almost like Brian and Clint were maybe frenemies.
Yeah, I feel like we can all think to either your own friend or a friend of a friend where you're like, oh yeah, they should not be together ever again, but they're friends.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the path that they were on. However, they hung out all the time. So
I
who's to
think
say?
that we really dig in and analyze these kind of things when it comes to a case like this.
Mhm.
But when someone is in mental crisis, the person you're going to fight with the most is going to be your best friend.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, David, I think we all can be our true selves around the people that we love the most.
Right.
And sometimes that creates animosity, right? But we're doing
Well,
it because we're totally comfortable in that situation.
but also two mid-20-year-old men yelling at each other in a bar on St. Patrick's Day.
Pretty normal. They were 27 years old and they were drunk and things fucking happen. We're gonna go to the day in question. The day of Brian's disappearance actually started out the night of March 31st of 2006. This was a Friday night. It was the beginning of spring break. And although Brian was really tired and he had spent a ton of time on exams and things like that, he really wanted to take the night out and go celebrate. He was flying out with his girlfriend that following Monday. They were going to go to Miami. And so he's, let me just let loose for a little bit. So the Friday night in question started out with dinner with his dad, Randy, and they went to Outback Steakhouse. The time wasn't quite stated, but just from drawing context clues, I would say they probably went around 6-ish or 7. And there's conflicting reports about this dinner, right? So some reports state that it was just a normal dinner with a son and a father. And Randy had talked about having a conversation with Brian and saying, hey, I think you're a little too tired to go out. Maybe you shouldn't do this. And just having this banter back and forth, right? However, there's some other reports from maybe quote unquote insiders that say Brian and Randy weren't having a good time. Like they weren't in a good place. And so this dinner was actually like their come to Jesus conversation after the passing of Renee. And part of the conversation that they were having was due to the life insurance policy split. So it was speculated. And again, I didn't see it stated officially from any credible sources, but I did see it said a lot that maybe Randy was a little upset with how much Brian was getting versus he was getting versus Derek was getting. There was also some speculation that maybe Randy was dating sooner than Brian was comfortable with. Not that it's okay, but remember Renee had terminal cancer, so maybe if he did meet a woman friend, he confided in her and then dating could happen quickly after that.
I just always thought life insurance policy like 100% goes to the spouse.
But that's what leans me towards that was a come to Jesus conversation with Randy and Brian. That's what that dinner was about. I've gone back and forth a couple times on my life insurance policy. Sometimes it's all to Grayson, sometimes it's all to Luke, sometimes it's split up. After Brian and Randy have dinner, Brian goes back home because Clint is going to meet Brian at his house before they go out for the night. So they plan to do a bunch of bar hopping on High Street, which if anybody went to college or was in any major city, a lot of college cities, I guess I'll say, there's always that one street where all the bars are on, right? So for Ohio State University, it's High Street. And lucky for Brian and Clint, Brian's apartment is only a 10-minute walk from the first bar that they go to. So the two decided to start their night, I think around 9 p.m. at my favorite name for a bar ever, the Ugly Tuna Saloona. So they take the 10-minute trek. Their plan for the night is they're going to have at least one shot, possibly also a beer at each bar that they go to. So they go there, they do this, they go out, they go to another bar, they go out, they go to another bar, right? In the midst of all this, Brian calls his girlfriend Alexis around 9:45 p.m. Now, Alexis was in Toledo, Ohio this night. She was at home visiting her parents because she was flying out to Miami on Monday. Spring break was starting. She just wanted to like say goodbye to family before I go on this trip and just have a quiet weekend at home, right? Some people say that Brian actually had a conversation with her, while other people say that Brian left her a voicemail. Now, both could be true, right? We say that all the time. Two things can be true at the same time. But there is a voicemail, and I don't have the audio, but I had listened to the audio a couple times where basically Brian came out while he was at the bar and said, Hey, just wanted to call you because I miss you. Everybody was asking about you. I was just telling them how amazing you are. I love you so much. I can't wait to see you on Monday. Hope you're having a good night, beautiful. It was just like the perfect voicemail that every girl wants to fucking hear.
Did he usually talk to her that way? Do we know that?
I think so
Okay.
from everything I've heard.
So that wasn't like
Yeah.
an unusual thing for
Right.
him to be. Okay. Just curious. All right.
So,
Yeah, no, he was pretty lovey-dovey.
and he's also, so he's lovey-dovey, he's handsome, and he's studying to become a doctor. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So fast forward to midnight that night. Brian and Clint are out. They're having a good time. Clint's, hey, let's call up Meredith. So they call up Meredith around midnight. They're at a bar. They're both pretty drunk when Meredith arrives. So she's, hey, I'm happy to hang out with y'all tonight, but y'all can't walk anywhere really. And they're like, let's go back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. We gotta go finish our night there. And she's cool. I'll drive y'all there. She drives them there. There's a parking garage that is less than a mile from the bar, and they park there. All three, Brian, Meredith, and Clint, are shown on surveillance camera arriving at the Ugly Tuna Saloon at 1:15 a.m. And I want to show you all right now a picture and a video because walking into the Ugly Tuna Saloon is not like walking into any bar that you and I typically walk into. It's a little bit different. And so here's what I mean by that. So first thing I want to show you is a picture of, and this is actual like picture of Brian on surveillance camera. So if we see here, so down at the bottom here is like a street level, and this is a full escalator up to the bar area. You have to come in on an escalator and you have to exit this bar on an escalator. And so this is going to be important later. But right here, we can see Brian, who is in front of Clint and Meredith here, and they're entering the bar at 1:15 a.m. Now, because I think it's a good point, I also want to show you all, because if you've seen any Dateline 2020, anything about Brian in this bar, for me, until I saw this video, I didn't realize how big this area was. And there is a, albeit intoxicated YouTube user who did a walk up to this Ugly Tuna Saloon area. And so I want to show you all that video as well. But that will show you all just how much bigger this area is than what we tend to think when we're watching it on screen. And apologies in advance if anybody's watching this on YouTube. Again, this user was self-proclaimed intoxicated going to this bar, but wanted to show us the area where Brian walked into. So this again would be the escalator that he's going up to. And it's like a one-story, I would say, that you're going up on an escalator. And I think he took this, the user took this at around bar close time-ish. So a couple important things to note. So when you get up here, you see these two security guards who are always standing by this other exit. But look how huge that is. There's just, it's not just you go up and there's this one little hallway, which is what they lead you to believe in every Dateline, every episode that you've seen on this thing. So that was just bananas to me. This is 1:15. So quickly after this, Meredith and Clint stated that they got a little separated from Brian. So they're probably into the bar by 1:20 or so, right? So it wasn't until 1:55 a.m. that night that we now see another surveillance video. And I don't have a picture of this, but what I will do is show this area that we had seen just prior. So we see Brian coming up this escalator here, right? If we go to what would be their right, the entrance to the bar is going to be right here. And it looks like a normal bar entrance. Now, 1:55 a.m., where we saw Brian was off to the other side here on this landing. And remember, there's those two police officers that are back here guarding this hallway. But we see Brian outside here at about 1:55 a.m. talking to two females. There's some reports that say that he was aggressively flirting with these females. There's reports of them putting their phone number into his phone. just the reports of them saying that he was going to walk them back to their car. But regardless of all this speculation of it could be this, it could be that, what we do know is we saw Brian outside at 1:55 a.m. I will say these girls were identified. They were obviously questioned by police. They were later cleared. And there's really not a lot of notable information that came from these conversations. It was the first time they had ever met Brian. They never saw him before in their lives. They did state, okay, we are talking to him at 1:55 a.m. They're seen going down the escalators at 1:58 a.m. And at that time, they said they saw Brian leaning against the wall of the bar. So he's leaning against the entrance to the bar at 1:58 a.m. Now it's about bar close. It's 2 a.m. Clinton Meredith can't find Brian. They're looking in the bathroom. They look all around the bar. They look outside the bar. We don't see Brian anywhere. However, they do remember him saying something to them at some point when they had gotten there, like, I'm going to go see XYZ. And they think that he was saying, I'm going to go talk to the band. So this makes sense for Brian because he's a huge Pearl Jam fan, like huge, like basically a roadie, right? He has a Pearl Jam tattoo on his arm. He went and saw about 1 million of their shows. Such a huge fan that later on in life, Pearl Jam, on 2 of their shows that they did after Brian went missing, they dedicated songs to him. They asked people to watch out for him. So Brian and Pearl Jam were like this, right? For him to go talk to the band isn't out of question. So that made sense to them. Now, the True Crime Garage coverage that I listened to, at least one of them, is from Ohio and from the Columbus area. I think one of them even went to school at Ohio State University. But they're very familiar with this area, and they actually knew who this band was. And so they reached out to the band and they said, hey, you were at Ugly Tuna Saloona the night that Brian went missing. And they're like, we were. Yeah, I guess we don't really remember. Finally confirmed that, yes, you were there that night. Do you remember anything strange? And what the band said was, yeah, people came up and talked to us all night. We went out a back entrance with the workers. Sure, there were some other people that were there with us. We don't remember Brian per se. I can't tell you if he was there or wasn't there, type of thing. So I just want to put that out there because I do think that's important. But eventually, after Clinton Meredith called Brian, text Brian a couple times, basically they finally leave a message and say, hey, we don't know where you are. We can't find you. If you need a ride home, please call us. They didn't think it was awful because, again, Brian's done this stuff before. He's only 10 minutes from his house. He's a big boy. It's fine. So they leave the bar, and Clinton Meredith are on surveillance, leaving the bar down the escalator. One thing I do want to note, and I think this is a good place to put it, there was no record of Brian paying for any of his drinks this night on a credit card or a debit card. So one of 2 things happened. Either he had somebody pay for his drinks all night, or he paid for them all in cash, which according to Randy was unlike him. He didn't carry a lot of cash on him. So it could be something or it could be nothing at the same time. So eventually word gets to Randy. Clinton Meredith called him all that night. Alexis calls him all that night. The next day, Alexis comes back to Columbus from Toledo, and she goes and sits in Brian's apartment for a little bit, hoping that he's going to come back. He doesn't come back at all on Saturday. The next day, Alexis called Randy and she's, hey, I'm a little worried about Brian. It's outside of his norm. He's sleeping it off somewhere, or I'm just going to go disappear for a little bit, which he had been known to do from time to time. And Randy's like, yeah, that is weird. Let's call the police station. So Sunday night, they call the police station, and the police basically give the old adage of it hasn't been 48 hours. He's 27 years old. He could run away if he wants to. We've all fucking heard it before, right? Just garbage. Randy and Alexis and Derek are like, fuck that. We know that's not the case. They start searching garbage cans that night and searching the area, asking people about Brian. Nothing comes to fruition. And so the police had said, hey, he's due to fly out on Monday. Let's just wait and see if he shows up for his flight. I'm sure he just is sleeping it off somewhere for the weekend, right? So Monday morning comes, Alexis is at the airport. She's really waiting for him to come, and Brian never shows. Now, this trip was like super duper important for many reasons. Number one, Brian was obsessed. And when I say obsessed, like with a big fucking O, with beach life. He often said, I want to be just like Jimmy Buffett. He had made quotes of saying, this doctor shit is just for right now. I'm going to own an island someday. I would love to live the rock star life. I want to be a beach bum. So going to Miami was like a dream to him. So that's number one. Like he would not miss that flight. Number two is this flight was a gift to him from Renee. And it was the last thing that she gave Brian. It was a Christmas present. For him to say, like, fuck you, mom, I'm not taking your present, like, that'll be off, right? And then number three is it was speculated that he was going to propose to Alexis. Now, that was a lot of talk. There's no record of him buying a ring, but they did, I guess him and Alexis did talk about it. They looked at rings, things like that, but he didn't officially have a ring. However, he still had Saturday and Sunday to buy the ring, so maybe he was going to, right? We don't know. He was also flirting with girls that Friday night, so maybe not. So that Monday, finally, police are like, okay, maybe this is serious. Maybe something is going on. So Randy calls again. Hey, look, he didn't show up for his flight. So please start an investigation from that point on. I will not say immediately because now it's been almost 72 hours. They first look into homeless shelters and hospitals. No Brian. So then they say, oh, let's look in to see if he took any flights. No flights with Brian. Let's look into the Ugly Tuna Saloon. Let's go search that place, search the places around it, search all the footage. And this is where the infamous, if you watch Dateline on this case, the cops did a very deep dive into the surveillance of the bar this night, and they watched every person coming up the escalator and every person going down the escalator. And they were able to account for every single person except Brian. Now, I do want to put a caveat on that because y'all saw how big this place was, right? I have a very hard time with this case, and I did a very deep dive to try and see where are these emergency exits? How do you get out of these emergency exits? What are the other places to get out? I couldn't find any videos. I couldn't find anything, but I do know there's other ways to get out of this bar besides these damn escalators. Yeah, it's a great media trap to say, oh, he went in and he never came out. However, y'all saw the hallway that the police were standing in front of. He could have easily went down that way. There was also an emergency exit, and there was some plywood doors up because there was some construction going on behind the bar, and the plywood doors were not very concealed. It was very easy for somebody to get through. So that was another place that he could have went through. So what I do want to say about that is kudos cops for checking the escalator, but there's other ways, right? Unfortunately, many of these ways didn't have a camera. There was one emergency exit where there was like the, hey, fire alarm if you do this. It was a motion camera, and apparently there was no motion that was detected. The other one didn't have a camera in front of it, and the other one, they said, oh, the police would have seen him go through here. Obviously, that all leads to nowhere. And now we're going to start going into a deeper investigation. So now we have to start questioning people. We're going to question Brian's family. We're going to question Alexis. We're going to question Clint and Meredith. We're going to question the two girls that he talked to. They ended up questioning about 100 people in total. Came up with really nothing after that, unfortunately. Then they went to all the other bars and all the other residences. They asked people if they seen Brian. There was some street cameras. They looked and they couldn't see Brian on those. There were some business cameras. They couldn't see Brian on those business cameras. They searched his house to see if anything had come there. I will say his house, his glasses were still there. His bed was still made. It really seemed like he never even came home that night, to be honest. They also checked the dumpsters. Caveat about the dumpsters, though, if you're checking the dumpsters on Monday, chances are a lot of those have already been emptied. And so they did also do a grid by grid search of at least one landfill, if not two, and didn't find anything. The sewer system was the other big thing that they searched. But I'm going to share my screen and show you all. So there was a river that was pseudo close to this.
Is that like he just accidentally fell through a pothole?
Yeah, I don't know what that means
Or a
either. Like,
manhole? Not a pothole. You know what
but
I'm
a
talking about.
manhole. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so I don't know, like, why were we searching that?
I don't think
And
I've ever heard that the sewer system was searched in a case.
same. That was the first time I've
I
heard
mean,
of that.
maybe we need to do that more. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I've just never heard that.
The only thing that I thought maybe was because they also did an extensive search of the construction site that was behind the bar that was going on at the time, because there's a lot of speculation that maybe he fell into something back in that construction site. And that's where I thought maybe one of the holes led to the sewer system. Maybe that's why they checked the sewer system, but I
But
also thought it was weird.
they made the jump from don't bother us, call us in 48 hours, he can go missing if he
everything.
wants to landfills and sewer systems.
So, in my true Jamie fashion, that leads me to believe that they were like, we fucked up. We fucked up. We didn't take this seriously. So now we need to do overkill. I don't think the cops were involved. However, I do think they did a shitty job at this investigation. Okay, Ugly Tuna Saloona was right here on High Street, and the river was here. This is telling me if I go up and over, it's 2.5 miles. Maybe this is a mile, getting right over here. Far to walk when you're drunk, but maybe not far, right? So could have been
But-
in the river.
Could he walk at all? Like he was leaning up against the bar wall, right?
Yeah,
That was
so
his
good.
walking ability.
No, so good question. Actually, the two girls that were interviewed said that he didn't seem drunk at all, which kudos to you, Brian. You took 8 shots that night and you're fucking rock star.
But here's what I love about that is people want to say you're drunk is 8 miles or whatever too far to walk, but no, that's the perfect time to walk it. That's when you have the false knowledge of I can do this and time doesn't matter, and that's when it's going to happen. That's what we're seeing right now in Nashville, right?
With Riley.
Kind of like the video show where he face planted and then got right back up because you're indestructible, right? Nothing's going to hurt until tomorrow. So do I think that I could walk eloquently and gracefully 8 miles? Fuck no. But do I think that I could do it? Absolutely. When you're in a college town or like a bar city, like there are certain things are just looked over, and that plays in your favor if you're able to make it to your dorm. It plays against you if something happens to you before you make it to your dorm. And I think this is one of those cases. I think there was probably several people that walked his path that night. They just happened to make it home.
Do you know how much the other girls drank or if they were drunk, the 2 girls that he was talking to?
The only report I saw was that they were intoxicated.
Okay, because they said that Brian didn't seem drunk. But if I'm drunk,
Right. Yeah.
that means nothing to me. What was
Yeah,
that earlier
so take it with a
tonight?
grain of salt.
Jamie, where did Brian live?
Brian's address was 28 King of in Columbus, Ohio. So his
that's
apartment
really,
was in
really
the
close,
opposite
yep.
direction of the river, though.
But still, if you're really drunk, you could still get turned around,
Sure.
I would think.
But I don't think it was his first time at the Ugly Tuna Saloon.
Not if you live that close.
2 things I want to note about the rivers. One thing is, at the time of his disappearance, the river was only 2 or 3 feet deep. Could you drown in it? Sure. Could you disappear in it? Probably not. However, there were a lot of whirlpools in this river, and actually Randy and some other folks went searching for Brian in the river because they had to do a lot of things on their own because the police didn't do so much. And Randy actually almost got sucked into a whirlpool during one of the searches that they were doing. And Randy went and saw about 875 psychics, and one of the psychics said that Brian was caught in a whirlpool under a bridge post. Unfortunately, all these searches, everywhere they did, we got nothing. Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, stayed in his apartment for 2 to 5 days after his disappearance, just hoping that he would return. Eventually, she left. She had a daily ritual where she would call his phone every single day, at least once, sometimes 5 times a day, just to see if he would pick up or to see if something could happen. And it would always go straight to voicemail until 6 months after his disappearance, it rang. And she got really excited and she was like, okay, this means something. So she called the police, called the cell phone company, which I think was Singular Wireless. And they basically said that was a glitch. And it means nothing. I think I heard it explained from one of the detectives. If you have a cell tower and if it's super busy, some of the phones are going to have to jump to another tower to get reception. And it just so happened that when Alexis called Brian's cell phone, that it was jumping to another tower, and that's why it rang and gave her the false sense of hope that it was actually on or something like that. But speaking of pings, Carolina helped me do some research on this case. She dug up a couple of news articles, but then she dug up this really cool Reddit post. And I'm going to give this Redditor credit. His name was Socratic Tiger, SOCRATIC Tiger. And his post read what 99% of people don't know about the Brian Shaffer case. So naturally, I go into it, right? And it's talking about phone pings. And it says, did you know that Brian Shaffer's phone actually pinged prior to the Alexis pinging thing? And I was like, really? Tell me all about this. So it actually linked to a credible source. There is an individual by the name of Kelly Bruce did a 3-part series called Brian Shaffer, Dead or Alive. And full disclosure, I only briefly listened to episode 1 and 2, but episode 3 is an episode where she did an interview with the detective that was assigned to Brian's case. He is now since retired. His name is John Hurst. And there's a couple excerpts that I took from his interview that I thought were super notable. And so the first is, they did get 2 pings in the days immediately after his disappearance, which I thought was odd because everybody seemed to think that his phone was immediately shut off, but then it's pinging 2 times. He explained that the pings were not tied to usage, but more just like what I talked about before, your cell phone connecting to a tower, right? Whatever the reason for the ping was, they did look into where those pings happened, and they did do searches in areas of those pings, which is, I believe, why that grid by grid search of that one landfill happened. But I think the most important thing to note from those pings, the one thing that he said, what I can definitively tell you from these pings is he got out of that bar. I don't know where he is, but he got out of that bar.
If pings are that unreliable, why do we place so much faith in cell phone pings?
We went through the whole Alex Murdaugh trial, so we should know what it does when your phone moves. But I'm wondering if even when you have apps that do background refresh on things like weather and just maps and stuff like that, wonder if that even like pings a tower when that happens. I have a ton of apps that are doing background refreshes, and I wonder if that would ping.
That's a
or
good
something
point.
too.
That could be. Again, the ping technology was not fantastic in 2006.
But in a crime of opportunity, do you think that they're thinking that far ahead of, let me do something nefarious and also take your cell phone so I can track who and what is happening? It seems like a lot of extra forethought for.
We don't know where his body was versus the phone. I think we invest a lot into the pings of where the body is or the person is versus where the shit is.
And we don't even have a body in this case.
Yeah, and this is where I'm just belaboring Janelle's point of when it rang, that's just a glitch because it was jumping towers, no need to look over here. But at the beginning, oh, for sure, no, we know that those pings are actually right. Like, it couldn't be a glitch there either. Get out of here.
Actually, and I will say, I think they did do a slight search into where the ping happened with Alexis's phone call because it was outside of the Columbus area.
But I guess that's where I just don't know if it's jumping towers, is it pinging from that secondary location that we know wasn't the original tower?
The short answer is we don't know. And basically that's what he said is the GPS and the pinging technology was shit at that time. So
It just feels convenient that it's, no, for this we know for sure, but not this. But like, it could be that too, like, I don't like it.
I don't either.
okay, so then after the pinging, the detective talks a little bit about the construction site going on behind Ugly Tuna Saloona. So he said definitely it was easy for anybody to get back there. It was chained, but anybody could slip back there. He did say there was a hole. It wasn't huge. It wasn't like anybody could slip in there and disappear into the abyss. It was definitely very messy. It would definitely be very hard for somebody to go through if they were intoxicated, but not impossible. They did search the entire area. They took off doors. They broke through concrete. They dug holes. Nothing was back there. There was one report of a cadaver dog that had an indication, but again, they did all these things and nothing was found. Dead end number 685.
There's a hole?
His exact words were, there was a hole that was back there that wasn't too big.
And they searched back there.
Mhm.
What
They did
is
an extensive search of the construction site.
what is not too big? Can I bring it back to Ray Rivera? Larger than a frisbee, smaller than a hula hoop.
It was probably Ray Rivera size, yeah.
But also, wasn't it the Branson Perry case where there was like a giant hole right near? What's going on with these random holes in places?
And sewer.
Searches, what the fuck? Yeah. That baffles. The sewer search gets me too. We're searching sewers and landfills. He did talk about they had this camera at the emergency exit for the Ugly Tuna Saloona. He said there was a camera here. It would pan from side to side. It would make it hard to pick up on anything other than motion. The Ugly Tuna did go on record to say that they had a security guard working this exit and did not see Brian or anyone suspicious going through here. I shrug my shoulders at that. This detective did go on record to say that he does not believe that it's possible for Brian to still be in the construction site based on the search that they did. They also did see a suspicious person, and if you watch some things on this case, you see they refer to this guy as orange sweatshirt guy. He's seen going up and down the escalator a couple times, and I think at one point was maybe even behind Brian Meredith and Clint. They did find who that guy was. They brought him in for questioning. He said he was a taxi driver and he was trying to find people to get a taxi ride, and so they cleared him. Some people agree with that. Some people say that's bullshit. The detective did agree that the pings, based on the evidence collected and the data received from the phone company, either could be possible that it was a glitch or it could be possible that the phone was turned on. So he could see either one being a plausible answer to that.
That narrows it down. I give it 50-50. I'm right either way.
Then you guys are going to love what he continues to say. There's a couple things I want to like break into before I go into the rest of his interview. This is very interesting. First of all, and I didn't put this anywhere in my search, so Clint was asked to take a polygraph and he refused because he lawyered up immediately after Bryant went missing, and his lawyer was like, don't fucking take the polygraph. And everybody's, oh, he didn't take the polygraph, he must have killed him. No, we all know don't fucking take the polygraph, right? If you've studied true crime at all, you don't take the fucking polygraph. And that's why I didn't really want to put it in here. However, maybe it makes sense now to talk about it because after a lot of this search and investigation was done, Clint was eventually subpoenaed by a grand jury, and he came to that court hearing with his attorney, and his attorney stated Clint will not be appearing before this grand jury. And Clint's attorney went on record to say, and I quote, excuse me, goosebumps, if Brian is still alive, which I'm led to believe from what detectives tell me, it is Brian who is causing his family and friends pain. Brian should come forward. So I got goosebumps when I read that. However, the police say we never talked to Clint's lawyer like that. But I'm thinking, if I'm an attorney, why am I going to go on record saying that if somebody didn't actually lead me to believe that? Another thing I thought was very interesting is, again, this isn't from the detective interview, but Clint supposedly had an ironclad alibi based on Meredith's testimony of what happened. And so in this podcast with Kelly, she has this almost minute by minute of Meredith accounting her recollection of that night. She states, 12 a.m., I receive a phone call from Brian and Clint to meet them at 12:30 a.m. I meet Brian and Clint and drive towards the Ugly Tuna Saloona, as that's where they decided they wanted to go. Around 1 a.m., Brian disappears and then reappears, and he comes into the bar with us at 1:15 a.m. Around 1:30, Brian walks away from us and goes in the direction of the opposite corner of the bar. Close to 2 a.m., after talking with Clint for a little bit at the bar, we both realize that we don't see Brian anywhere. We proceed to search the bar for Brian. When we could not find him, we each called him and left him a message to call if he needed a ride. I then walked to my car with Clint and we headed back towards Clintonville, which is where Clint was house sitting. Saturday morning, I drive Clint back to Brian's house where his car was. We both start to drive back to our respective home. Neither of us knock on Brian's door to check on him. I want to pause right there for a second because there's other reports that state that when Clint and Meredith went back to Brian's house that they actually went inside. So again, this is one of those cases that like if you want the case to read something, you can find it on the internet. However, for the all intents and purposes of this podcast, I'm going to go by what Meredith went on record saying. So we're going to state that they went to Brian's apartment, got the car, didn't knock on his door, which just saying that's a shitty friend. Then she goes on to say, I went back to my apartment and Clint went back to the home that he was house sitting. Later that day on Saturday, I went to work out at the gym. Saturday at 9 p.m., Clint came to my apartment and we watched TV for a few hours. Then Saturday at 11 p.m., Clint left my house. Sunday afternoon, I went to the gym, and while I was there, Clint called me asking for the number to the police station. At this point, he had heard from Alexis, and they were both worried. I then became worried too, and I started to call local hospitals looking for Brian. Around 3 p.m. on Sunday, I was shopping and I called my mom to talk about everyone being upset about Brian missing. Sunday evening, I was home. I may or may not have spoken to Clint at some point that evening, but didn't really hear anything until the next day when it became apparent that he was missing when he didn't show up to his flight. Throughout the first week, we all just thought that he decided to leave for a week and that he would be back. So that was Meredith's account for the night. We don't have the accounts from Clint because once he lawyered up, he really didn't talk much to law enforcement after that.
So she says that they left pretty close to 2. Yet we have the accounts from the 2 girls that Brian was like basically at the entrance of the bar at 1:58.
Yeah, so if I would have to guess, he's out there at 1:55. He talks to them for 3 minutes. They see him leaning against the bar, hopefully going back in. And probably the lights turn on at 2. Clint and Meredith are talking. The lights turn on. They're finishing up their drink and they say, oh shit, where is Brian? By that point, it's probably 2:05, 2:10, right? And so then maybe they do a quick sweep around the bar. Fuck, I don't know where he is. Go back outside. Now maybe it's 2:10, 2:15. Call him, text him. So I could see it. And that's just me. I've lived these nights.
For Brian's apartment, I'm just thinking when they say they didn't go up to the door, and some people say they did. How did you get into his apartment building is my question, because I know I've lived in an apartment where you can't even get into the lobby without a key.
Yeah,
much
so the accounts that I saw where they said that they went in, Alexis, I think, had a key and she was staying there waiting for him and hoping that he would come back.
And as far as that night or the next morning when they go to get Clint's car, I can see not going to check on him first because you're thinking if he left the bar, he was probably so drunk that he's passed out still, so I'm not going to bug him. And I'm just coming to get my car, and he was an asshole for leaving us at the bar, not knowing. You might not that morning because
Right.
I don't know, when people have left their cars at my house or whatever, they'll come in the morning and pick it up and I don't even know that they're there.
You're not thinking worst case scenario, and he's got however many voicemails and text messages from you already. So
Yeah. He'll call you later when he wakes up. I
Yeah,
mean,
you're like,
at
I'm
that
not going to be
point.
super annoying and now go knock on his door after I called and texted him 18 times.
And you said that at one point she said that she may or may not have talked to Clint.
Yeah, so her words, she said, I may have spoken to Clint at some point that evening.
See, I don't like that. You can give me like a timeline of a night when you guys, I guess she was invited out drinking later, and if she was driving, she probably wasn't. Maybe like a beer or 2.
But this was
But like,
Sunday night that she said that. So this is 2 nights later.
but I'm saying from the time she says they called me to come out, you can give a pretty decent timeline of the night. But
Now
then
you
you're like, oh, I
suddenly
don't know, I
can't
might have
remember.
called. Yeah, I don't know, I can't remember. Somehow that just doesn't fly with me that you can give such a detailed account, but this you're like, who knows?
I'm there with you. Okay, so going back to the investigator interview. So a couple things that he stated about Brian's relationships with his family and friends. He was quoted to say, I believe Randy really did love his son. However, the information we got led us to believe that Brian was really close to his mother and interacted with her quite a bit more than he did with his dad. There was speculation about a disagreement about the life insurance and that Brian was due to get more from his mother than others. And then he went on to say, and I quote, "We did get information that there was a disagreement between Derek, Brian, and Randy thought that the boys were getting more than they should have from the life insurance policy." It was also stated that a lot of expenses that Brian had were payments that were being made by his mother. And then there was also statements to say that Brian did suffer from depression prior to his mother's passing. He was on Prozac at some point. However, at the time of his disappearance, he was not taking Prozac and did not appear to be suffering from severe depression. And there's this really crazy, weird thing that I'll throw out there because it was out on some Reddits and the detective brought it up, but I take this with a very tiny grain of salt. Some people speculated that Brian was struggling with his sexuality, and that's why all of this happened, and he was trying to run away. However, they looked into that and they investigated that, and there's no concrete evidence to support it. So then the $1 million question was, Kelly said, "Hey, my podcast is called Brian Shaffer, Dead or Alive, so I need you to answer this for me. Y'all are going to love this." He said, "I don't believe that it was suicide. Most people that die by suicide want to be found, and we did not find his body as of yet. Could it be abduction? Everything that we've looked into so far doesn't give us an indication that he was abducted. Could he have left on his own? That's absolutely a plausible theory. He had a lot going on. His mom died. He had the engagement. He had his classes, etc. And we have no plausible evidence to lead us one way or the other. Could he have fallen and gotten amnesia? This is also a possibility because, again, we have no body. We have no signs of foul play, etc." And then he did go on to state that, "I think this investigation leads us to a strong possibility that he could still be alive. However, it also leads us to a strong possibility that he could no longer be with us." But
He's hedging all of his bets. He's
correct,
just gonna win no matter what.
correct.
It's like going to the horse races and putting money on every horse.
On every horse. However, though, and this will play in my speculation a little bit, I didn't know that the police led down this road. And if you listen to True Crime Garage, it really seems like the police are leading more to, we think he's alive. And then if you tie in, here's what Clint's lawyer said about this, maybe. And I didn't put this in my notes anywhere, but there have been multiple sightings of Brian everywhere from Michigan to Florida to Canada to Virgin Islands to Mexico to Italy, everywhere, right? None of them have come back that they were actually Brian. A month after Brian's disappearance, his apartment was broken into, and there's a police report of this. I do have it. Police were unable to fully determine what was taken at the time. However, they had Alexis come in and do what she remembered being there. And from what they could tell, a TV, a DVD player, and some DVDs were taken. And that's what's on the official police report as well. The detective didn't seem to think that was of significance. It sounded like maybe there was other apartments that were broken into that same night. They chalked it up to somebody heard about the case and they wanted to go into his apartment and see. Randy did, shortly after his disappearance, cut off his credit cards and debit cards, but there were never any signs of him using them, even in the few days after. So I thought that was notable. He was also never found in any hospitals or any arrest records. And then one more sad thing that happened in 2008, there was a big storm that went through Columbus, Ohio, and Randy was out cleaning up after the storm, and a tree branch fell on him and ended up killing him, unfortunately. So then Derek was left within a 3-year span. He lost his mom, his brother disappeared, and then his dad died, right? And Randy, literally up until the day he died, was searching for Brian. He had just did an interview and a podcast and a TV thing literally the day before he died, trying to get the word out about Brian's case. But one odd thing that happened with Randy's death, on his online obituary, there was a message on there and it read, and I quote, "I miss you, Dad. Love, Brian. Virgin Islands." The police obviously looked into this and they tied this back to a public computer in Ohio. And so they said, "We don't think this is Brian. We think this is just somebody playing a hoax." So it never went anywhere.
Will suck.
Now, I would like you all to ask questions that you need to ask before you give your speculations. And then if there's any theories that we don't cover, I'll talk about those before I go into my speculation.
I don't really have any questions.
Did I do such a good job that nobody has questions? Or is this case just so fucked that you're like, I just don't know?
So many things can be true at one time.
So my speculation, unfortunately, is weak because what my speculation boils down to is I think pretty much everybody except for the family, I'm going to say, failed Brian on so many levels. And I think if maybe one or two things could have been different, we might have a different conversation today, or maybe we would never know Brian. But I just think that we talk about a lot, especially with women going out, you go together and you leave together. And I don't think that should be exclusive to men or women either. I think if you're going to go out as a group, you got to come home as a group. So I can understand the frustration of not being able to find Brian when you want to leave. That sucks. We've all been there. But again, they failed him in that regard.
So do you think at that point, because I always wonder that, let's say we all went out and Jamie does an Irish goodbye. Do we call the cops that night, do you think? And then that's, I've done my due diligence.
I guess my answer to your question is another question because what did they actually do?
They called and text him. They did search the bar. I will give them that. They went in the bathrooms. They searched all around.
Yes, but that's where I'm like, again, this case is just so hard because it's like, okay, they checked the bathroom, they did a loop of the bar, they did a call, they did a text. Maybe that's good enough. But okay, he's a huge music person, Pearl Jam person. Did they go closer to the dance floor? Did they go up to the band? Did they check the hall? We looked at that video, it's a big space. That's why my answer your question is another question because I don't know.
That just brought up a good point, Dana. As you were talking, I was thinking about that. How do we know that he didn't go off into that far corner where all those chairs and tables were to have a conversation with somebody and pass out?
And then, of course, stupid wait 48 hours, call us back with the police. The stupid, an adult can go missing if they want to go missing with the police. And I do agree. I think the dramatic overcorrection is just that, is a dramatic overcorrection by the police. Luckily, Alexis was at the apartment, so she filled in where the police failed that way. I feel like it was just a series of things that could have happened better or different. Clint lawyering up, to me, that's exactly what you should do. And especially if your lawyer is saying, don't take the polygraph and shut up, then that's what you should do rather than trying to defend yourself. And with what he said with the subpoena, one, your lawyer's there to defend their client in this case. I think he did a good job there, but by saying what he said of he believes that Brian's alive based on what detectives have told him, yeah, I do think detectives, whether intentionally or not intentionally, made that allusion to this attorney. So I feel like we talk about this almost every week. Obviously, the police know more than we know. Obviously, other people know more than we know. But I'll take a line from David and say, damn it, Jamie. One more thing before I'm done with my terrible speculation here. But you've said it a few times tonight. Like some people said this, but some people say that. And I feel like it's just this weird game of telephone that is coming down to who's writing the report. How long after did they say this?
I put all my salt in what the detective said in that interview because it is truly one of those cases where if you want to find that the sky's blue or you want to find that the sky's red, you can do enough internet searching to find either answer.
Yeah.
And you just have to navigate towards the reliable sources.
Yeah. And you said that they interviewed 100 people and plus they went door to door, which is great. But also you're going to get 100 different stories and you're going to get 100 different eyewitness accounts. And I feel like that's where you have to take these little nuggets of who knows what. Nobody knows anything because everybody knows something. It's almost like they shot themselves in the foot by trying to get so much information. I guess that's my long-winded way of saying I don't know, but I don't feel like Brian is alive today.
So I like where you went with, we went to the bar together and we need to leave together. And that's why I was questioning that. And I feel like I would be just annoying fucking bitch who would be like, I don't care that you said they went missing. I know that they didn't. So who else do I need to talk to? What else do I need to do? And I would make a scene. I would be like, I will jump in this garbage can right now and go look for him if you're not going to. What are we going to do? And
Yeah.
I feel like the police and his friends did him a disservice that night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I luckily haven't been in the situation in which I need to be like, we're going to turn on the lights, we're going to get a manager, we're going to hunt down this man, whether you like it or not. Everything stops now. But
Turn on the microphone, make a statement, have him come.
yeah, this
Huh.
will be, we'll Walmart this bitch where a parent is at the count, come up, we're going to find this mofo.
Code Adam. Code Adam.
Exactly. But at the same time, you said he had at least 8 shots that night and he
Yeah.
didn't seem drunk, but who knows? He was a bigger guy. Maybe he was fine. But if let's just say he was drunk and was passed out in a corner, I feel like
It's so heartbreaking to me. Yeah. Because once I saw that video, I was like, there's so many places he could have been.
absolutely. The friend giving the interview with the step-by-step account. On one hand, I want to say she Asia McLeaned it and wrote down what happened when she realized. It's such a mind bend, but my speculation is that I don't believe he's alive, and I just think so many people failed him at many different junctions.
I think that a lot of people failed Brian that night, but I'll tell you who's not on an island. Brian. Brian's not on an island. I don't think that he disappeared himself. I don't think so. But there are things that point to it, like maybe he was depressed because of his mom. But then again, like if I don't know how much money he had in the bank, but obviously none of the money was missing or he wasn't using the credit cards, or if he had cash, there would have been some proof that he pulled out a big chunk of cash or whatever. He just,
Can I want to dip in for 1 second because you brought up a good point. They did not look into his previous bank records to see if he had been pulling cash out. They failed him again. You're correct, Dana.
Okay, well, I still just don't believe that. I will say there is a theory that I don't believe, which would be more of the smiley face killer theory.
I knew you were gonna
Yes,
go.
I had to go there. I'm not gonna stay there very long.
I wrote that down too.
He was talking to the 2 girls and then the weird guy on the escalator that's going up and down. Maybe this guy's just waiting and the girls are the bait. He's drinking shots, GHB, all the things. I could go on about smiley face for a very long time. I'm not going to. There are a lot of things that point to it for me, but my major speculation here is that he was really fucked up. Maybe he was like so fucked up that when he was kind of leaning against the wall, he was not really able to stand. I really do think that he wandered off. I feel like security guards or whoever weren't actually paying attention. It's fucking bar closed. Everyone's leaving at the same time. How are you really knowing if you're seeing this person or not? We all know eyewitness accounts, not always very credible anyway. And who's paying attention? There's a bunch of drunk people at the same time. Like he could have fucking wandered by and no one even paid attention or saw him, right? And I think he wandered down, maybe fell or crawled into that construction zone or hole, and they might have searched it, but I don't think they did a very good job searching it because as the story is telling us, everyone failed it. There it is. There's my speculation. Misadventure.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt David. So please don't kill me. But I also just want to tack on to what Missy's saying of like, how would they even notice? He's a good-looking guy that at bar close, aren't you looking for the people that are stumbling out and weirdos?
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say, I feel like history is repeating itself right now with the Raleigh Strain case. And here's the I love everything that you all are saying. The dance with the one that brought you and power in numbers. Luckily / unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. This is being spoken by women. And so you all, thank God you all know you need to have another girl with you, another person with you. But you have a good-looking straight white man. No one's going to think what can happen to him will happen to you. We know what can happen to you all. We don't know, and we have not accepted what can happen to him because he is the perfect, everybody wants to be the straight 6'2", good looking white man. I hope people know how I'm saying that when I say it, but that's just are in place. I really want us to think about this, okay? And because I know the answer that we're going to want to say to this, but let's really think about it. If we were all out together and we went to a gay bar and it was all 6 of us, and at closing time, I was gone, but you see me dancing with this cute guy over here and being flirty or whatever, we're out of town, we're on vacation. If it was closing time and I wasn't there, and I'm saying this respectfully toward me and us, this is not a negative, but I would think that our brains would go immediately to the guy he was dancing with was cute. Like he went back to his hotel with him. David's fine.
No, we would think you would message us or relay the message somehow. We are a different group. I totally get what you're saying, but
no, but you're right though. But then, so my question to that is that because of we are in 2024 versus 2006 and we are true crime obsessed and influenced?
I think it's partially us being true crime obsessed and influenced because I was just going to say, just us talking about this case today, I'm not going to let any of y'all leave the bar without making a fucking stink, right? Like, I don't care if you were grinding on him and y'all were damn near having sex on the dance floor. I still want to know where the fuck you are.
We should have been friends in college because I was definitely the Irish goodbye friend up until actually not too long ago, probably. But that was something I always did. And I'm thinking that now it's also an age thing because I think like college, you think college, you're not thinking maybe all the things that could happen to you, women or men, right? And then when you get older, then you're like, oh, but this is real and that's real and that could happen and that could happen. Not just the true crime thing, but just our mature brains were starting to go, oh, that's a terrible idea. I would never now just leave. If we were out at the bar, I'm not going to Irish goodbye you guys. Note that. Okay, just note that just in case. All right, but
when I was in college, when I would go out with my girlfriend, we would always be like not pulling each other off of somebody, but it wouldn't matter if the guy was hot and we thought they were going to go home with him. It's nope, you're coming with us.
Yep.
And then at least if then they said, no, I really want to go with them, it's like, all right, you might let them go, but then at least you knew who they were going with. You wouldn't
And it was
just let them
consensual.
walk off. Yeah.
I was just going to say, to throw in my 2 cents, I might have been in college a little after some other people on this call. And
Are you calling me old, Dana?
Oh,
no, it was like 3 years later.
you're calling all of us old.
I was in college when she was born, so.
If we're saying, is it 2024 or is it because we're true crime people? This was back in 2018 when I was a senior. It was during homecoming and it was like 11 o'clock in the morning that we were all drunk walking around house party hopping. And there was one that I just had that gut feeling of, I don't want to go to that house. And I was with 2 male friends. So when they turned left down the sidewalk, I just went right and they never noticed. I didn't get a text. I didn't get a call. Luckily, 2 other friends just happened to drive past me and we went to Chipotle. They were not drunk, for the record. I was just amazed that I'm like, I Irished goodbye and not a text, not a call, because it didn't cross their mind. That was potentially really stupid. Granted, it was 11 o'clock in the morning, not.
Listen, that does not matter.
But it doesn't matter. Yeah. So have the times changed? I don't know.
I always say this, but I think time is all relative. I don't think bad things weren't happening. Like we talk about the 70s. Like, how did anybody survive the 70s?
You literally said that on another podcast episode that we had.
But things are bad, like no matter what year it is. I know there wasn't all the true crime dedicated TV channels. You know,
or like armchair detectives and all that stuff, right?
Podcasts. But I think bad things have always happened. I just think when you're that age, like in your 20s, I did real dumb stuff.
Yes.
Like, I'm amazed that nothing terrible has happened to me, but
Girl, I should be dead 3 times over. I feel
think
you.
it has a lot to do with our age, where now we think about the what ifs more than we would have.
not only did we not talk about like just true crime, but there just wasn't the same news broadcast of everything.
Mhm.
Like that's why Ted Bundy could do all of his things, because he could move from state to state if he wanted to, because it wasn't even in the news everywhere.
Right.
And I also just wanted to, like, part of the reason I brought that story up too is because is it possible that the female friend did want to stay and look for him, but Clint was like, he'll make it home. He's fine. Like, I want to go. Fine, let's do a lap if we have to. Send him a call, send him a text. We
I
don't know
do want to
anything.
say he was more friends with Clint than he was with Meredith. But also, him and Clint supposedly fought all the time, so I don't fucking know.
But I could also see two male friends being like, Brian always makes it home. I'm not worried about Brian. I know how good he is when he gets drunk.
I said that in college, actually, about a friend. Yeah, so I feel that.
When my friends and I were coming out of the closet and finding ourselves, we had this thing in the first few years of we walked in the bar together and then we burst in our directions and we knew what time to meet at the door. And whoever met there at that time means you didn't find a trip, but we assumed everyone was safe. I did put as a part 2 of what we just discussed is, I know that you all know my heart, but if there's anybody that's listening, I do not victim blame. But I truly wonder how much of the straight, white, good-looking boy played a factor into the demise. Because of course his boys are going to be like, I'm not going to tell the girl that likes him that he really found a trick. There's so many ways for people to care but not care, or not think into the situation, because it's boys being boys. I really feel that when I first started talking about my speculation, the responses you all had are also coming from women who have never had it easy. And even when we know that things are getting rough and scary, the straight white man has it easy. And then especially in these college years, that's when you're indestructible, invincible. And so I think there's a lot of that mentality. And so what your parents and friends are teaching you of don't walk to your car by yourself, no one's telling the white man that. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
what you all were taught and said in the power of numbers is different than what I was taught as a gay man living in the South versus what the straight white man was being said. You know what I mean? And so I think all that needs to be taken into consideration. I think that two things can be true at one time. And the ugly truth is what played in his favor is that he's a white man. And what played it in his demise is that he's a white man. And unfortunately, in this case, there's no good medium.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have a finger to point. I think that maybe he walked away and went to a construction site. Maybe there was enough alcohol for there to be like that knocked out alcohol poisoning kind of thing that led him to being hurt. People want to hold on to like Clint getting an attorney. What I didn't find and what I would like to know, and this could be rhetorical unless someone knows the answer, but what financial bracket was Clint's family in? What did they know about laws? I've known people, we've known cases, right, that know enough about the laws. If they call you, say nothing, and you demand an attorney. So was he demanding an attorney because he was just scared and because he was guilty? Or was it because someone had said, we've got the money, we've got the power, let's get you an attorney, we know the law? I would like to know what that is, because it's so easy to say that's a flag, but my dad would tell me to get an attorney immediately.
So
That's
I
interesting.
heard that he, in the initial like interview, he did fully cooperate.
He did.
And then it was after the fact that he got an attorney, which signaled to me like your dad told you, I'm
That makes
getting you
sense
an
to me.
attorney.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to his family's socioeconomic status,
No,
but
but what Janelle just said made
yeah.
answer, right?
Mhm.
I know I don't have anything to really point to. I guess the last thing that I want to say, and I truly mean this respectfully, but people have said there's reported sightings. He is, if you close your eyes right now and I said, think of a good looking, white, fantastic guy in college. he would be what you would think of.
I'm gonna put this in my closing, but he does have some notable things on his body.
Okay.
And I think that's maybe why a lot of the sightings have been ruled out.
Okay. I love that. Then yeah, I think I'm done. I didn't have a finger other than either we love or hate straight white people. I'm not sure yet. But
So,
at the
David,
outset,
at the end of the day, do you think it was foul play?
no, I think that it was an accident. And I think that again, the straight white man playing in your favor and against you, I don't think that enough consideration was brought into the investigation of what if we were just drunk and silly versus this side of it. And it was a construction site malfunction, is what I'm afraid.
Cindy, what you got?
I was curious what else was in that building when you showed us the escalator. Was it all just a hallway or was there more
I think there
offices or something?
is like a movie theater. I did a Google Earth search today, actually, and it looked like there's maybe like a semi food court. And I've seen some Reddit and YouTube videos of after where there is definitely a movie theater there. So there's multiple things in that complex.
Okay. When I had heard about this case in the past, I'd always heard that cameras were on every exit and everything, but it sounded like it was only on the escalators. There's stairs next to it. So then did he go hang out at the movie theater? Was he on the roof? There was all those things.
The roof came up with the True Crime Garage people, actually.
Yeah. So I feel like whatever happened that he did on his own, leave the bar and leave that building. Whether it was, I know we talked about before, did he leave with the band? Maybe they didn't pay attention. Maybe he went on the roof, something like that. Somehow he left on his own is what I'm thinking. Or if there was an elevator.
There was an elevator there too, yes.
Okay, so somehow he got down without being
So
on
there was,
security camera.
if y'all remember, like when we watched that video, there was those two officers standing right here. Behind them is where there was an elevator.
So when I was like with Missy, where it could have been the smiley face killer, only when you mentioned college and rivers, like it could happen. And of course, was this in the time of Israel Keys? So you never know. You got to throw
Yeah.
that out there.
2006 to 2012.
Yeah.
That would have been a way too easy connection to have been made.
Oh, I know. That's why I just noted it.
So see this number amount of pages, there's several. Of course, this is where my ending conclusion is, right? These are the beginning. One of the very first things I wrote is Missy will say something about the smiley face killer.
No, he didn't.
No, I swear,
That was on.
I swear to God, I did, and I forgot to say something because it was 12 pages ago. And then when Cindy said, I was like, oh.
That's on my second page, along with Israel Keys. But yeah,
Water in college.
yeah.
I mean, I love it.
Yep.
I don't think just because he was depressed, it's not always to the extreme, right? Even if you're on Prozac and things like that, it doesn't mean that you're suicidal. It just means that you have mental health issues and you need them fixed. But that doesn't mean that you're going to run off. And so he might have just been like, I need 5 minutes by myself, went outside or something. And then maybe, so you said that he didn't use any of his credit cards at the bar. If he was going to go to Miami, maybe he did get out a whole bunch of cash. He's using that at the bar. And maybe when he walked outside, people saw him with a lot of cash. And so then something happened from that point on. I don't think he's still around either, but I feel like he got out of the bar and something happened, whether it was the construction. Something happened and he's just not able to be found. Also on that map that you were showing, there was ravines and things as well, not just the river. Maybe he walked this way or that way instead of
Yeah.
towards the river. But yeah, along with everyone else's line that we've been saying, regardless, if you come with somebody, you should leave with somebody at the bar or at least have some type of check-in point. But
There's been
again,
way too many cases we covered where that
yes,
didn't happen.
yes. But yeah, I think overall, it wouldn't surprise me if anything was true on this case. I think we've had a few like that where this is what I think, but anything could happen.
Yeah.
That's all I
Well, the
got.
detective said that too.
Yeah. I'm taking my bets with him because either way we'll win, apparently. 50-50.
I All right, Janelle, it's to you now.
I feel like going last did not serve me at all because I still feel like I'm in the same place. But previously, up until doing a little side prep for your coverage, I had always been on the foul play or accident island. So I'm wondering, was he packed for his trip to Miami?
Nothing concrete says it.
I was just curious.
And I feel like it would have came out because some of the stuff I listened to said that Alexis stayed at his house for 2 days. So she would have been like, oh, I saw his bag packed.
Surely somebody would have checked to see if his luggage was still in the apartment.
Yes. And the only thing I can say about that is Alexis, okay, so they couldn't obviously go to Brian and say what was in your apartment and what wasn't in your apartment when the break-in happened. So they had to go to her because she was the person that was there the most. And so I feel like she would have said, oh, a suitcase is missing. I'm 41 years old. And if I'm going on a trip, I'm still packing 24 to 48 hours before. Like, I'm not packing 3 days before. And so he likely would not have had his suitcase packed on Friday night to go on a trip on Monday morning.
And I hate the whole gender thing, but seriously, think about it. Like, how many times have any of us went to go on a trip with our opposite sex partner and you're packed and ready 2 or 3 days beforehand and your partner is waking up an hour or two before the plane takes off and their suitcase is empty? You know what I mean? Like, seriously.
I'm that person.
So then I'm not trying to do the whole gender thing with it, but it makes me wonder, is that really a
I
thing?
know. We didn't even talk about gender. My daughter just moved to California, and the night before her plane landed at 11 o'clock at night, we were packing, starting to pack. 2
See?
suitcases
Listen,
jammed in.
And even Jake, who lives here, I don't think he knows where our suitcases are, much less if they were missing, when to pack.
These were just I had to grasp at some straws, but ultimately, I don't think that he left on his own and is just living off the grid somewhere. I think it was either whether it be foul play or an accident. Did he get hit by a car? And then maybe his body was disposed of to hide that crime. It's so wild to me that he was so close to home on a walk that he had taken
probably 1,000 times.
Yeah. The construction site thing to me, I don't think it was like a whole parking
No.
garage situation. It was like a room, right?
I think they were building like maybe a grocery store or something. So like it wasn't like crazy. I truly believe the detective when he says he wasn't fucking back there.
Yeah. And another podcast I listened to that covered this, a comment was made about you don't just keep building on top of bodies. I don't think he was back there. I think
Yeah.
a whole lot of mess is made about there was only one way in and one way out. We know that's not true because after seeing the video,
Drives me fucking crazy. Yes.
this was massive. If there was only one way in and out, it would have been like a stampede at 1:58
I was gonna say,
a.m.
I don't think you can legally do that because of fire escapes and stuff.
And that's the point I was going to make in this is you always have to have at least 2 exits in any building that you create.
I feel like not only was there a disservice to him then, there's also still a disservice because a lot of narratives that are being put out there are so untrue, or things that I believed when I first heard about this compared to doing another revisit before tonight. There's just a lot of false truths out there that I think maybe push people to go one direction when that's just not a possibility.
Right.
I just said a whole lot of words. I
No,
got
but you're
nowhere.
right. I think to sum up what you said is I feel like everybody who researched this case in the initial stages and watched the Dateline episode was like, oh my God, there's only one exit and one entrance. I can't believe that he didn't come out. Listen, look at the whole fucking building.
Yep.
And so we need to expand our search.
I do think if he was in the water, if it really was like a 2 to 3 foot level,
And that True Crime Garage said that, and
he would have
fully
been
believe in what they
found.
say because they live in Ohio. So yes.
I know that I was grasping at straws with the whole like construction thing, but a part of
No,
me,
you weren't. A lot of people went there.
It's a serious.
yeah, absolutely. But a part of me wondered if, I don't know, it would just be a bunch of fucked up chaos things happening. But like in my lifetime movie that I've created in my head is like this construction guy comes up at 8 o'clock. He's got his coffee in his hand, his sunglasses on, he's a little hungover. Someone is sleeping in one of those like concrete round tube things that ends up going into the ground, and cement goes into it to build the foundation thing. And if he was sleeping in there, because even if he woke up when that was happening, he would still fall, which would cause damage to the body. On top of it, no one's going to hear you, and then concrete's poured on top of it. Because what also leads me to that too is you have to have a legitimate reason to bust up concrete and foundation and businesses for a judge to say, yeah, let's do all this to see if he's there. And there's nothing to show that he's there when that's where he is why my mind went there.
So they did bust up a little bit of it because
Oh.
there was a dog that went back there that had an indication, I think was what happened. So they tore off doors, they busted up concrete, they went into holes back in that construction area. And that's where that detective said, I do not believe he's back there.
David, I'm going to screw a little bit with your, because if they're doing correctly with cement work, because my
Oh
husband did
gosh,
this,
remember Cindy
some of
knows
it.
how to build elevator shafts and parking garages.
My husband was building a dam, but they have to like test the consistency is the wrong word for each layers of things when they're pouring cement. So if there was a body in there, it most likely would fail whatever test that they're
Fuck with
doing.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if we find where Jimmy Hoffa was, those people didn't care. That was way long time. There was no building code at the time.
All right. So before I go to my speculation, so I struggle with this case. Okay. So to David's point and to Janelle's point, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, when I originally looked at this case and I was like, oh my God, this thing is so crazy. I originally went down the path of he was met with foul play. Somebody on him going down the road and they killed him for money. Somebody wanted him for drugs, whatever the case was. And I was convinced that he was in a dumpster. Somebody dropped his body in a dumpster. There he was. Then I wanted to cover this case and y'all made me do more research into it. And now I'm hearing Clint's lawyer, I'm hearing the cop, I'm hearing all these things. And I'm like, in true Jamie fashion, I'm on my own island. I think he's fucking alive, y'all. I really do. Because the police aren't going hard anymore. To Dana's point, not that they were ever going hard. They do still have an FBI page up. Brian was officially declared dead in 2013. While the FBI is still looking, they're really not looking, right? And Clint's lawyer said that thing. Brian's detective said that thing. I don't believe that the message to his dad on his obituary had anything to do with it, but it only helps the case of him being alive. And then with his mom dying and him having such a hard time with it, he had all those conversations with Alexis before he went missing. He got in a million fights with Clint before he went missing. I don't think he broke into his own apartment. Some people do. He paid for his fucking bar tab in cash on a Friday night before spring break. That was crazy to me. I a little bit believe that he was alive. However, we had 10 plus sightings and none of y'all could tell me that was Brian. He had distinguishing features on his body where you would know if it was Brian or not Brian. So I'm the cop in this episode because I don't know. Half of me thinks he's alive and half of me thinks he was met with foul play. And I really genuinely am at a fucking crossroads where I don't know. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, he was met with foul play and he was thrown in a dumpster. Now I did a deep dive down this and I'm like, shit, maybe he is alive. I
Do you think
genuinely half of me
Clint
believes
helped
that.
him?
No, that is definitely it's a theory. Okay, and so to get into other theories that we didn't talk about.
Can I ask one question before we do?
Yeah.
So it's been a while now since that night in 2006. Why do you think he hasn't come forward yet to say that he is alive?
He's just living his life. Like he is gone this far. Why am I going to come back? It's almost like this is an awful analogy, but it's like the wife that got away with cheating for 15 years. Why is she now going to tell her husband?
And we have said this before in other cases. Dana read the coattails of that. There was a case we talked about, and I did some thinking after, and I was like, but wait. So I don't remember what case it was, but it's one thing if you find out that your mother has cancer and was terminally ill, and you're like, I want to go see her or be with her. But it's one thing that if someone like dies sudden, like when you think about like his dad, like the tree limb, right? That's a tragic accident. What would be the reason to come? It doesn't change anything.
Well, that's just it.
So
I
why
mean,
yeah.
yeah. Am I going to come to his funeral to what? It's not going to bring him back.
And with that being said, because I think his mom passed away with cancer, even if he did catch wind of that, which I don't know that it would be public knowledge for him to know that unless he still had a connection to somebody, right? But even if he did find out about it, a part of me would wonder if I was doing that, would I think, you know what, they've already mourned me, let it just be.
Yeah.
But you'd
Because
think he'd come back for his brother, right? His brother would have
no,
went through all of that.
but to David's point, do you want to put your brother through that again?
I guess I'd want to give him one relative back. He lost his mom, his brother, and his dad. You want to give him his brother back if I was the brother?
But could you imagine like the scrutiny? It would not be a celebration for
Right.
him to be
It
back.
would be an interrogation. And is that fair to do to Derek after he lost so many things?
And is it something that he would want to deal with? He's already done the hard part of, they all think I'm dead. They've all mourned me. If I go back, are they going to be excited to see me? They've mourned my death. If you get to that level of faking your death, you wouldn't want to turn back. And you've almost believed your own story.
And there was a case, and I want to say it was in Florida, and it was a disappeared case. It was, gosh, I think his name was Mike something, but he had kids, whole 9 yards, right? Whole 9 yards, had a family, and he disappeared, but he faked his own death. And then the only reason it came up is because I think the way they found his body, they had to do DNA.
He died, yeah.
Yeah. And when he died, they were like, holy shit, he's this missing guy. And he had, gosh, was it like 10 years?
It was a long time.
15, 20 even?
So we can't say that it just never happens.
I think if Brian was doing this on purpose, he would have faked his death so it was more concrete that he was gone instead of not
So I
knowing one
thought,
way or the
okay, so I thought about that, and actually I came up with my own narrative for this because I knew y'all were gonna come at me with this. So I think it might have just honestly been a situation of I'm gonna fly at the seat of whatever my emotions are telling me tonight. And so maybe it could have been as stupid as he was meeting with these girls and he either got rejected and he's like, oh, I'm not worth anything. Or they gave him his number and he's, oh, I'm a piece of shit. And so he said, you know what? This is the reason that I need to disappear tonight and I'm going to be gone.
But do you think that he would really do that when his family had just lost the mom?
So I go to, he had 8 shots and 8 beers that night.
I think there's repercussions of 8 shots and 8 beers, but your head might hurt a few hours later. But are you really going to invest in the decision you made, 8 shots and 8 beers, into it?
Unless he had been planning this for a while, I don't think he
but
just
then
took off
but
that.
then you would go to Miami and you could disappear easier in Miami.
That's what I was gonna say too,
Oh,
Cindy.
sorry.
Yeah. No, you're totally on point. But that's what I was gonna say is like, why not wait until Miami?
Yep.
So I want to go down all of the theories. So we talked about leaving on his own. We talked about foul play. We talked about could he still be in the bar? So that is a theory still, that people think that maybe he died in the bar and maybe the bar covered it up and maybe they put him down like a trash chute or something like that. Janelle brought this up, and I don't believe this, and we didn't really talk about this, but there is a theory that Clint helped him escape, or Clint was part of his disappearance, and that he knows more than he's leading on to. I thought that for a second, but not. I just don't
I
know.
would be thinking it was more Meredith than Clint.
So yeah, but Meredith was more Clint's friend than Brian's friend. So
All the more reason not to care, you know?
true, Cindy with the hard shit at the end. Okay, I could see that. We talked about the river. We talked about the smiley face killer and that aspect of it. We talked about suicide. We talked about every potential theory except, and I want to go on the record by saying I don't fully buy into this. So there is a theory about drugs. So there's a theory that orange sweatshirt guy was not a taxi driver, that he was a drug runner. There's also a theory that Clint and Brian were selling some kind of drugs, and that's why they were constantly getting in fights in bars. And then there's also a theory that says that's why they came back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon that night, because they knew there were drug buyers at that bar. And that maybe Brian and Clint got into a fight that night about the drug situation. And then when Brian left, he went to go do what drunk Brian thought was the right thing to do with the drug situation, and ended up being to his demise.
But why bring Meredith into this situation?
Because Clint wanted to fuck her. Had nothing else to do, anything other than that. So that was an interesting theory. I went down a big rabbit hole with it. I'm still not 1,000% there, partially because I love Brian and I don't want to believe that he was involved in that, but the facts point to it. It could go that way. So I want to give you some updates about Brian's family, friends, etc. So read a couple news articles, and it does sound like both Alexis and Brian's brother Derek have moved on. Alexis did finish med school. She actually opened her own OBGYN practice out there in Ohio. She did get married. She's ironically married to a contractor, hopefully not the same contractor that was building the construction site behind the Ugly Tuna Saloon. But they do have 2 children together, and her OBGYN practice is going great. She will still talk to media. She does still have memories and thoughts of Brian. She does still open her ear to hearing things about Brian. Her husband was even asked at one point if Brian would come forward and be still alive. What do you think that would do to your relationship? And he said, I think Alexis and I would still be together and everything would be fine. And so you can tell that his answer to that made me believe she is still very open about talking about it. So I thought that was cool. Derek has married his high school sweetheart. Brian now has a nephew. And so if he would come back to life, like, there's some shit there, right? Brian was officially declared dead. A lot of that had to do with so his like assets could be turned over to whoever they need to be turned over to. However, the FBI still has a profile page for Brian Shaffer. So this is still an active case. Brian, at the time of his disappearance, was 27 years old. He was 6'2". He weighed about 170 pounds. He had brown hair and hazel eyes. And today he would be 45 years old. Brian also has a few notifiable body markings. He has a black dot in the iris of his left eye that is super noticeable. He also has that Pearl Jam Stickman tattoo on his upper right arm. That is, I would say it covers from about the shoulder bone to not quite the elbow, but almost to there. So it's definitely noticeable. And so that's why I think a lot of the sightings of him were deemed not Brian. If you do happen to have any information that would be related to finding Brian or any tips about his disappearance, there is still an active Crime Stoppers tip line that is open. So you can call any of those tips into 641-461-TIPS. So again, 641-461-TIPS. And I really hope that we will have answers on what happened to Brian someday very soon. But unfortunately, until then, all we can do is speculate wildly. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show today. We ask you to please subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else that you find your favorite podcasts, just so you don't miss out on any of our episodes. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at SWAC Pod, SWACPOD, or you can contact us via email for questions, comments, or case ideas. Our email address is swacpod@gmail.com. That's SWACPOD@gmail.com. Thanks so much for speculating wildly with us tonight.